They ghosted you, played games, acted like they didn't care, and now you're here wondering if they ever truly valued you, if they'll ever feel your absence, if there's a way to reclaim your power without sacrificing your peace. Sound familiar? If you've ever found yourself in that emotional limbo where your worth was questioned, your love was taken for granted, and your silence was misunderstood, this message is your breakthrough. Here's the truth they don't want you to realize. The moment you stop chasing, reacting, explaining, is the moment they start feeling the weight of your absence like a storm in the silence. But here's the real question. Why does that moment work like a trigger? Why do they come crawling back only when you vanish into your own growth? There's a myth, a popular lie we've been sold, that being the bigger person means always being available, always forgiving, always showing up. But what if the real strength lies in restraint? What if real power isn't about making noise, but in disappearing so completely into your own evolution that your absence becomes louder than your words ever were? In Stoic Relationships, silence isn't weakness. It's a message, a sword, a revolution. And if you've been begging for closure, hoping for them to see your worth, let me offer you a radical shift. What if you never needed their recognition to begin with? This isn't just another motivational rant or revenge fantasy. This is a blueprint rooted in Stoicism, a philosophy of inner power, radical ownership, and emotional clarity. It's not about hurting them, it's about healing you. It's about reclaiming every ounce of energy they drained and forging it into a life so solid, so whole, that their return becomes irrelevant. Throughout this journey, you'll learn why silence hits harder than confrontation, how to weaponize your withdrawal into transformation, and how to make your presence so rare they can never reach it again. But this isn't about making them miss you, it's about making yourself unforgettable to you. So ask yourself, are you ready to stop performing and start evolving? Are you done feeding a system that only existed to keep you small? Because in a few moments, we're going deep, not into how to get them back, but how to become someone they'll regret ever losing. You'll learn the psychological roots of emotional manipulation, the hidden mechanics behind why they're still watching your stories, and how your energy was never the problem, it was the addiction. And what comes next? It's not closure, it's not validation, it's a revelation. Stay with me, because what's waiting in part 1 will flip the script they wrote for you and give you back the pen. 1. Disappear into power. In the world of deep emotional entanglement, where hearts are woven tightly into the lives of others, the most radical, transformative, and effective act of resistance and reclamation is not shouting your worth from the rooftops or publicly airing grievances. It is silence. It is the deliberate, intentional, and resolute act of disappearing, not physically, but emotionally, psychologically, and spiritually, into the sanctity of your own internal landscape. At this moment, when you remove your energy from their orbit, when you cease the chase, when you stop performing on the stage they created, you start an alchemical process. But what does it mean to disappear into power? It means refusing to give them any mental space, refusing to justify your emotions, refusing to react or defend. It's understanding that their absence, their withdrawal, their inability to appreciate you, created a vacancy that your own growth can now fill. And so you withdraw, not as an act of spite, but as an act of self-preservation and self-enhancement. You don't issue a formal statement. You don't post passive-aggressive memes. You simply step back and step up to the person you were always capable of becoming. Imagine forging a sword in silence, uncertain heat, tempered in solitude, so that when you emerge, you are sharper, stronger, more defined, more refined. That is the journey you begin the moment you stop seeking permission from those who never earned the right to your presence. This is not about revenge, it's about recovery. It's your sovereign right, your sacred journey. And hidden within, this withdrawal is a secret On the other side of your silence, they will begin to feel the vacuum you left behind, not because they loved you more than they thought, but because they thrived on your emotional labor, on your attention, on your validation. Without you reacting, without you chasing, without you performing your pain publicly, they will witness, perhaps for the first time, the cost of losing someone who once let them walk away with their heart. In this void, your power doesn't just exist. It radiates, it affirms, it defines. You become the authority of your own heart, the governor of your own peace, and the architect of a life that demands neither apology nor explanation. You're not disappearing to punish them. You're disappearing so profoundly into the person you deserve to be that anyone who ever mistreated you cannot mistake your absence for indifference when it's actually indomitable strength. This transformation in the realm of Stoic relationships is not theoretical. It is visceral. It is the silent eruption of your inner world, the tectonic shift beneath the surface of your own becoming. They might think they can handle its absence, but they can't, because while they were taking you for granted, they were becoming addicted to the energy you provided. Your responsiveness, your forgiveness, your explanations, your tears. And when those fall away, when they hit the impossible wall of your evolved self, that's when the mirror cracks, the ego trembles, and panic sinks in. You see it on social feeds, streams of curated joy. You hear it in their voice, overcompensated. Laughter, you sense it in the emptiness of unanswered messages. And all the while, silence stands between you like an immovable fortress. Disappearing into power is not passivity. It is the most active form of presence. It is the deliberate refusal to play by their emotional rules and the unwavering commitment to live by your own. While their world continues spinning with old expectations, you walk away from the script and write your own. Suddenly, without you responding, the story halts. Without your tears, no one has fuel for their pity. Without your explanations, they realize you were never as predictable as they assumed, and the person who thought they held the pen now finds there's no paper to write on. You've taken that away. And that's the ultimate shift. The moment you decide to vanish into your own evolution rather than remain tied to their low vibration, you begin to radiate a frequency that doesn't require their permission. Are you ready for that kind of power, that kind of peace, that kind of boundary? Because once you step into this stage, everything changes, not because they notice you, but because they can't stand not noticing you, and they don't even realize it until you've gone completely. In moments of solitude, you'll understand your greatness was never in their validation. It was always within you. You just gave access to someone unwilling to recognize it. Now, you walk away, not broken, not beaten, burning with purpose, disappeared into power. 2. Withdraw the emotional supply. When you first start to withdraw your attention, your care, your responsiveness, the supply they were used to starts to vanish, and what begins to emerge is a void they can't ignore. You need to recognize they didn't lose you. They lost the emotional access you provided every day. That attention, that quick "I'm here" message, that validation of hurt. You were the cure they sought. The emotional oxygen that kept them functioning, that kept their sense of self affirmed. And when that oxygen is cut off, withdrawal begins. But what does withdrawal feel like? It's rarely dramatic at first. They won't fall apart in public. They won't send you desperate messages. Instead, they perform. They post smiles that are too loud, laughter that's too forced, stories that are too edited. But the cracks appear in the late-night scrolls, the deleted posts, the late replies after hours of silence. And underneath it all, the internal script starts running. Why haven't they replied? Am I overthinking this? Did I push too far? That's the hunger phase, the jet lag of the heart, the disorientation of withdrawal. But it wasn't your job to react. In fact, reacting was the very thing giving them fuel. So you withhold, not with cruelty, but with sovereignty. You own the fact that you're no longer available. The key here is consistency. Silence becomes a signal stronger than any statement. And soon, in that dark void where your texts don't reach, they begin to feel it. They click your profile hundreds of times. They wait for the little dot that says active, and when it doesn't light, the heartbeat inside them skips. They remember how it felt when you cared. They replay your old kindness like an echo in an empty room. And that's where you gain your power, not from confrontation, but from absence. You don't need to send the message, "I'm gone." The withdrawal itself is your message. In Stoic relationships, withdrawal isn't punishment, it's preservation. Your peace matters more than their panic. This is your emotional border, your psychological fortress, and you hold it without aggression. You grip the silence and wear it like armor. You don't negotiate, you don't explain, you don't justify, you just are. And as each day passes, their need becomes more overt, even if their face remains masked. They like old photos, as if memorizing your smile. They revisit inside jokes in their mind. They imagine what a text from you might sound like, then recoil. When they realize they lost the access you once offered freely, the hunger grows louder. But here's where most people stumble. They mistake the longing for love. They think, they might miss me, I should reach out. And that's exactly what they want, that reconnection, that pattern restart. This is emotional training at scale. You trained them to expect a reaction. And every time they pushed and you reached, you were strengthening the bond, the unhealthy loop. Now break it. One way, no return. Let the hunger build. Let the silence take its toll, but keep going deeper. This withdrawal doesn't end when they cave. It ends when your heart knows its value again, when their panic no longer pulls at your peace. So the withdrawal isn't just theirs, it becomes yours too. You learn to settle into yourself, to find joy without their validation, to read books at night without reaching for your phone, to sit in quiet without craving a message. This transformation doesn't happen overnight, but it begins the instant you stop responding. And every day, your emotional supply finds its source. Within your own interests, goals, reflections, solitude, you become your own caretaker. And in that space, you realize liberation isn't about punishing them. It's about freeing yourself from reliance on someone who never held space for you when you needed it. You learn that love isn't a transaction. It's a signal not to give endlessly without reciprocity. In Stoicism, we learn external things may withhold, but our value does not. So you hold your value close. You withdraw the supply knowing the void will punish them in months of uncertainty, but you won't punish yourself by chasing. You rewrite the rule. You are no longer a resource to be consumed. You are a sovereign being whose energy is earned, not taken, and with every sunrise, that truth settles deeper in your bones. The hunger they feel becomes a testament not to your absence, but to your presence. And the more you stay silent, the more you remember. This journey is for you. It's not about getting them back, it's about getting you back. Let that sink in as you walk away from your last text, your last explanation, your last emotional supply. You are more than their requirements. You are a universe within yourself, self-contained, self-nourished. And they're left on the outside, wondering why the oxygen stopped. Because you withdrew, not out of spite, but out of self-respect. You withheld, not because you didn't care, but because you cared too much about yourself to remain in an empty space. When you finally rise, they won't know why. That's the power of Stoic withdrawal. It doesn't offer a place to return to, and it doesn't wait for permission. This is how you win, not by fighting, but by withholding, not by reacting, but by residing in your own worth. Let that fuel your next steps. If you're finding strength in this part of your journey, drop. a #1 in the comments. Give it a like, and if you're ready to continue rising into your power, hit subscribe. Let's keep building this freedom together. 3. Become the trigger, not the responder. There is a quiet moment in every journey of healing where you no longer ask, "What can I say that will make them see?" Instead, you ask, "What do I need to become so that I no longer care if they ever do?" That is the moment when you begin shifting from being the responder to being the trigger. When someone has trained you to respond, to react, to plead, to explain, they have kept the balance of power rooted in your emotional availability. Your pain, your reaction, your explanation, it was fuel. Every text you sent trying to gain clarity was not received as love. It was received as validation of their control. And every time you tried to argue your value or explain your hurt, you were unknowingly playing into the performance, because what they really feared was not your anger, it was your absence. And when that absence is paired with silence, not the kind that waits, but the kind that dominates, that is when you become the storm they didn't expect. That's when your energy becomes a trigger. But what does that mean? It means you stop showing up in predictable ways. You stop texting first. You stop liking their posts. You stop checking their stories. You no longer care if they're watching. You no longer strategize your silence as a tool of manipulation. Your silence becomes your new language. You stop asking, "Will this post make them think of me?" And you start living in a way where the thought of them interrupts nothing. In Stoic Relationships, this is where the power realigns, not through vengeance, but through vacancy. You're not pretending, you're not acting cold, you're simply unavailable. And for someone who was once fed by your emotions, that lack of access is a shock. At first, they will pretend they don't notice, they'll keep posting, keep moving. But inside, their internal dialogue begins to shift. Why didn't they reply? Did they stop caring? Who are they talking to now? The questions become a spiral, and the irony is, the less you react, the more your absence reveals. You reveal the gaps they tried to fill with your attention. You reveal the ego that fed off your forgiveness. You reveal how little they actually had control. Once your energy disappeared, and that revelation is brutal. It's psychological exposure, because they don't get to point fingers anymore. They don't get to spin the narrative that you were too emotional or too intense. There's nothing to accuse when you don't play the game. They're stuck alone with their stories, their silence, their guilt. You no longer react to the breadcrumbs they throw. You no longer light up at the hint of their return. You no longer shrink yourself to be more palatable. You stop playing the role they wrote for you. And in doing so, you force them to sit with the fact that you were never the character. They were just never the author. You become the ghost they can't figure out, the version of you they can't reach. And when you walk in this kind of power, people notice, not because you shout, but because you no longer show up where you used to. And that shift, that mystery, becomes their obsession. They go through your old messages, looking for the moment you changed. They scroll your feed trying to identify what went wrong, but you don't give them clues. You've transcended their storyline. You've exited the performance. You are no longer responding because you've realized your worth doesn't live in anyone's recognition. It lives in your refusal to need it. The real trigger isn't a sarcastic caption or a subtle jab. It's a timeline empty of signals. It's a presence that is no longer public. It's a transformation they can't trace. And that mystery grows. They might date others, but nothing hits the same. Because nothing is as intoxicating as the one who used to give everything and now gives nothing. They remember the energy, the warmth, the effort. And when it's gone, they don't know how to replace it. They'll try to recreate it. They'll mimic your softness with someone new, but it won't stick because your energy wasn't just emotion, it was art. And you can't duplicate authenticity. You can't copy care. So while they struggle to adjust, you move differently. You don't broadcast your healing, you embody it. You don't use your glow to trigger them, you use your silence to transcend them. You walk away from the stage they built and build your own world, one they cannot enter. This is not about pretending to not care. It's about actually not needing to be understood by someone who never took the time to try. You become the trigger not through force, but through peace. The kind of peace that is so disruptive to someone addicted to chaos, they don't know how to survive it, and that's when it hits. You didn't disappear, you evolved. You didn't go cold, you went clear. And when someone only knew you through your reactions, your stillness becomes unbearable. That is the real trigger. That is when they realize they never truly had you. They only had access, and now that access is gone. Not temporarily, not conditionally, permanently. This is where Stoicism becomes a weapon, not for war, but for wisdom. You use restraint as resistance. You hold your silence as strategy. And every time you don't react, you rewrite the story. Every time you don't explain, you reclaim the narrative. You no longer perform for their ego. You no longer orbit their validation. You stand whole, grounded, and you let the absence speak. Because while attention might be loud, absence is unforgettable. And that absence, that distance, that withdrawal, it becomes the lesson. They don't miss your words. They miss the way they felt around you. And they don't know how to recreate it, because what you gave was rare, and now they live with that loss. You, my friend, have become the silence they never expected, the clarity they never earned, the trigger they can no longer pull. You've stopped asking what will move them, and instead you've become the immovable force they never saw coming. That's where power lives, in presence withdrawn, in peace. Preserved, in value no longer debated. And that's the version of you they'll never get back. 4. Guard your glow. Imagine becoming the embodiment of your own light, the kind that doesn't flicker under scrutiny, doesn't dim when ignored, doesn't wait for anyone's validation to burn bright. This is your glow, and protecting it means refusing to play by their old rules, refusing to shrink yourself to fit their comfort zone, refusing to perform for approval. When you guard your glow, you root yourself in your own dignity and growth rather than in the echo of someone else's voice. You stop explaining why you deserve love. You live it through your actions, your improvements, your standards. You stop lingering on memories of what was. You channel that energy into being someone they can't touch, someone they can only witness from a distance. In this state, your worth becomes self-evident, and it stops being a question they can ask and starts being a statement they can't deny. You're no longer the person they left behind. You're a new person they can't recognize. They might scroll your feed, but nothing hits. They might ask mutual friends about you, but the answers won't give them the warmth they crave. Because warmth is not just presence, it's consistency, character, self-control, and relentless personal sovereignty. While they focused on surface-level connections, you built depth. While they chased drama, you cultivated peace. While they traded love for convenience, you redefined what love actually looks like when it's rooted in respect and self-worth. Guarding your glow means letting go of anything that doesn't serve your growth, dead-end conversations, passive social media updates, emotional rewinds that leave you drained. You surround yourself with challenges and mentorship, not gossip and distraction. You invest in your health, your mindset, your vision. You read books that expand your understanding of yourself. You notice how your posture changes when you stop bending to fit into empty expectations. You notice how words suddenly flow easier when they come from a centered place instead of a wounded one. And in that space, your glow thrives. Quietly, unassumingly, unshakably, you don't walk around wearing confidence as a show of surplus. You walk them out wearing it as the entire battery. There's no need for spotlight. You radiate by default. This is the ultimate Stoic stance, not reacting to absence but rising above it, not waiting for proof but becoming proof, not asking for acknowledgement but carrying it effortlessly through presence. Here, growth isn't something you post, it's something you become. This is the pinnacle of Stoicism, of Stoic relationships. It's not about being emotionless, but about being in control of yourself, your space, and your value. Let them wonder how you became so composed, so whole. Let them realize that while they were busy pretending to heal, you were busy evolving. When they whisper your name in regret, they won't find you in the same place. Instead, they'll sense your echo in the way you move, the way you speak, the way your calm meets a world that expects chaos. That echo is your glow and guarding. It means refusing to dim it for them or anyone else. Some might say it's cold, you'll call it clarity. Some will claim you're unreachable, you will recognize it as unshakable self-respect. When the world expects you to perform, you perform the work instead. When they hope for brokenness, you hope for brightness. This glow of yours is not fragile. It's forged in silence, guarded by discipline, and fueled by your refusal to settle for anything less than what aligns with your highest vision of yourself. So stand firm in your unspoken victory. Let your purpose drown out their noise. Let your progress deafen their doubts. Let your dignity estrange their games. And when someone finally looks back and asks why they can't reach you anymore, that's not on you. That question is theirs to answer. Because you didn't burn bridges, you built boundaries, you didn't abandon yourself, you prioritized yourself. You didn't perform for them, you evolved for you. Now here's the turn. If this part of your journey resonates, if you're guarding your glow right now, like and comment #1 so I know you're shining with me, and hit subscribe to keep fueling this rise together. Let's keep building our lives from light, not from longing. 5. Cut emotional access permanently. There comes a point in the healing process where you no longer seek closure, you no longer crave apologies, and you no longer entertain the idea of unfinished business being finished by anyone other than yourself. This is the moment you cut emotional access, not as a tactic, not as a punishment, but as an act of self-respect so severe, so absolute, that it rewrites your story without needing to erase the past. Because emotional access is not a casual gesture, it is sacred, it is powerful. And when you've given it to someone who mishandled it, misused it, or manipulated it, reclaiming that access becomes an act of liberation. The moment they sense you're no longer emotionally accessible, not just ignoring their messages, but truly inaccessible, unreachable, unreactive, they begin to feel the walls close in. You were once a sanctuary. Now you are a sealed temple. And no matter how loud they knock, no one is home. When you cut emotional access, you no longer bleed energy for people who thrived on your confusion. You no longer explain yourself to people who never deserved your clarity. You no longer try to justify your emotions to people who only ever used them to manipulate your reactions. You become emotionally sovereign. You don't flinch when they test the waters. You don't decode their vague messages. You don't write captions hoping they'll notice. You don't look for closure in the same place that gave you pain. Because when someone has had full access to your heart and proven they were not worthy of it, the only dignified response is to remove the key permanently. And that is where true Stoicism lives. Not in pretending you don't feel, but in choosing who deserves to witness those feelings. Stoic relationships are not cold. They are intentional. They are based on mutual respect, not emotional volatility. So when you walk away, you do so with your peace intact. You do so without sending a warning. You do so without broadcasting your exit. You just go. Emotionally, mentally, spiritually, you leave them in the exact place they left you. But unlike them, you don't look back. You don't leave the door open. You don't answer the "hey stranger" texts. You don't let curiosity masquerade as concern. Because now you know what your energy costs, and the price for accessing it is integrity, not apologies, not promises, not nostalgia, just consistent, proven, honorable behavior. And if they can't meet that standard, they don't get access. Because what once was freely given has become fiercely protected. This is the truth most people won't tell you. You don't owe anyone continued access to you just because they once had it. People can forfeit their spot in your life through their actions, and you don't have to keep negotiating your boundaries just because they suddenly want back in. Wanting access is not the same as deserving it. And in this new season of your life, your energy is no longer up for grabs. They can reflect, they can regret, but they cannot re-enter because the version of you who would have entertained them is no longer alive. And that's the difference between healing and hoping. Hoping says maybe one day they'll change. Healing says, I've already changed and that's enough. So you walk proudly, quietly, you reclaim your emotional ecosystem, you protect your glow, you move through your days no longer pulled by their inconsistency, no longer triggered by their absence, no longer waiting for their epiphany. Because your breakthrough didn't come from their apology, it came from your decision to no longer need it. You don't just block them on social media, you block them energetically. You block their entitlement to your space. And while they spiral, wondering how the person who once showed up with a full heart could now be so silent, you no longer carry guilt for their confusion. Because silence is not cruelty when it's clarity. Distance is not drama when it's dignity. And emotional unavailability is not a game when it's a boundary. Let them think what they want. Let them speculate. Let them tell stories about your evolution, because while they talk, you build. While they assume, you ascend. While they scroll through old messages, trying to find the moment you stopped caring, you're creating new moments with people who don't require explanation, only connection. This isn't you being cold. This is you being complete. And once you've found your peace, you never trade it for attention. You never surrender it for temporary closeness. You never compromise it for the illusion of comfort. Because you've learned that being alone with your integrity is more healing than being surrounded by people who deplete you. You've learned that being misunderstood by others is easier than betraying yourself. And you've learned that once someone has lost the privilege of your emotional access, they do not get to rewrite the rules of re-entry. That chapter is closed. That version of you no longer exists. And that glow they remember, it doesn't shine for them anymore. That love they once received, it has been redirected inward. That attention they crave, it's now being invested in your peace, your vision, your future. You don't send messages at midnight anymore. You don't cry over who they're with. You don't check if they watched your story. You simply live, and that is the consequence they never saw coming. Not bitterness, not revenge, just absence. Complete, irreversible, undeniable absence. And when they come back, you'll realize they don't miss you, they miss access. But access has a cost now. And unless they're bringing the respect, the depth, the consistency, and the emotional maturity you deserve, there is no deal. This is how you rise. This is how you set the standard. This is how you embody your worth without ever needing to prove it. And this is how Stoicism becomes your greatest guide, reminding you that inner peace is never negotiable, not for the past, not for potential, only for the present moment and the person you are becoming. 6. Let them suffer in silence. Silence is not passive. It's not emptiness, and it's definitely not weakness. In the realm of Stoic relationships, silence is a strategy, a fortress, a language for those who have grown beyond words. When someone has wronged you, not in one dramatic blow, but in the slow erosion of your dignity, your time, your effort, they expect noise. They expect you to explain, to react, to argue, to beg. because your reaction feeds their ego. It tells them they still matter. It reminds them they still have a place in your emotional world. But when you offer nothing, not a message, not a stare, not a caption to decode, what you're offering is not absence. You're offering a mirror, and the reflection staring back at them is devastating. They see the emptiness they brought. They see the lack of integrity they tried to mask, and for the first time, they are forced to face themselves without your energy cushioning their insecurity. This is where the real suffering begins. They pretend they're fine, but fine doesn't scroll your profile at 3 a.m. Fine doesn't rewatch old stories. Fine doesn't save your posts in secret. What they're doing is performing for others and for themselves, because pride won't let them say it out loud. But you know, they miss you, not in a poetic, redemptive way, but in a desperate, unspoken, ache kind of way, the kind of missing that haunts them, not because you were weak, but because you were real. And when someone loses something real, the void doesn't fill with noise, it fills with regret. That's why you must hold your silence, because silence becomes power when it's intentional, it becomes healing when it's disciplined, and it becomes clarity when it's honored. Don't let temporary emotions reopen doors that were slammed shut for good reason. Don't let nostalgia dress up manipulation as sincerity. Remember, people don't come back because they've changed. They come back because you've changed and they can no longer control you. And that loss of control feels like chaos. So, they project. They post quotes about outgrowing fake people. They talk about their healing era. But real healing doesn't need an audience. You've learned that. You're living that. You're not pretending to move on. You've moved. You're not signaling evolution. You've evolved. You're not waiting to be missed. You've become unreachable. And that is what disturbs them most. They were prepared for your anger. They expected a breakdown. They even hoped for one, because it would mean you still cared. But silence offers no feedback. Silence closes the book. Silence removes them from the narrative completely. And the silence you give is not cold. It's calculated, it's wise, it's stoic, because Stoicism teaches us that we do not waste energy arguing with people committed to misunderstanding us. We do not waste time giving access to those who fumbled us repeatedly. And most importantly, we do not react simply to remind others we're still affected. In Stoic relationships, our silence is our boundary, and it's louder than words. Some people only understand value through loss. They only respect presence once it becomes a memory. And unfortunately, some of them only feel love when it's gone. But your job is not to keep proving you were worth it. Your job is to keep moving forward with dignity, without making announcements. Because the more you elevate, the quieter you become. The more peace you find, the less explanation you need. The more healed you are, the less tolerance you have for chaos disguised as passion. So you let them suffer, not because you hate them, but because you refuse to betray yourself again. And if they truly had the depth they pretended to, they wouldn't be suffering in silence now. They'd be standing beside you. But they aren't. They're stuck in their old patterns, spinning in their own web of avoidance, trying to replace a connection they never fully understood. Meanwhile, you've stepped off the stage. You've let go of the performance. You're not the same person who begged to be seen. You are now the person who sees themselves so clearly. No one else's vision is required. And that terrifies them. Because they depended on your brokenness. They fed off your confusion. And now, with your silence, you've taken away the fuel. Their ego is starving, and their pride won't let them admit it. But their behavior tells you everything. Passive-aggressive posts, accidental messages, showing up in places you frequent, asking mutual friends how you're doing. These aren't signs of love, they're signs of panic. They miss the supply, not the relationship, the attention, not the connection, the control, not the commitment. But you don't return to being a resource. You don't volunteer your emotional labor. You don't hand over your power just because someone suddenly notices what they lost. because it wasn't a loss for you. It was a gain. You gained clarity. You gained boundaries. You gained freedom. You learned to sit with your own silence until it no longer felt like punishment. It felt like protection. And that's the power of Stoic relationships. They transform silence into sovereignty. They turn heartbreak into healing. They teach you that you don't have to match someone's chaos with your own. You can simply remove yourself from the storm and let it rage without you. You become the stillness they can't decode, the distance they can't cross, and when they finally realize there's no way back, that's when the silence becomes unbearable. But it's not yours to hold, it's theirs to learn from. So let them grieve in secret, let them watch from afar, let them wonder who you've become, because they don't deserve the answer. They had the chance to grow with you. They chose games, now they live in the consequences, and you keep walking. Not away from them, but toward yourself, toward the version of you that doesn't flinch at loneliness, that doesn't react to guilt, that doesn't bend for breadcrumbs. You walk with your head up, your boundaries firm, your silence unshaken, because this isn't the end of your story. It's the turning point. It's the page where you stopped surviving their emotional starvation and started thriving in your own sacred stillness. Let that silence speak volumes. Let your peace be the punishment. Let your life be the closure. So if this part of your journey spoke to you, if you're holding your silence with strength, like and comment number 1 to show you're stepping into that power. And don't forget to subscribe, because this story isn't over. The next chapter is where you stop being the one they lost and start being the one they could never reach again. They'll never forget you. Not because you tried to be remembered, but because you walked away in silence and never looked back. So here we are. After all the silence, after all the growth, after all the chapters closed without ceremony, you've arrived. Not at the ending of a story, but at the beginning of something unshakable. Because this isn't about them anymore. It never was. It was always about what needed to die inside you so the real you could be born. The part that begged, gone. The part that waited, gone. The part that performed, overextended, twisted yourself into something softer so someone else wouldn't have to face their own edges. Gone. You're still here, but you're no longer. Made of pieces, you're whole. And that wholeness didn't come through someone finally seeing your worth. It came through you deciding you'd no longer live your life as someone else's echo. You are your own sound now, your own voice, your own power. They will remember you. They will speak your name, but they will not know how to reach you. Because you've moved into a frequency that cannot be found by those who still think love is control, that silence is manipulation, that absence means weakness. You've become the kind of person whose glow doesn't ask to be seen. It is simply undeniable. The kind of person who knows that real love is not earned through pain, and that real peace is never traded for crumbs of someone else's attention. You are not here to be decoded. You are here to be lived, in truth, in strength, in stillness. And for all the moments they thought they broke you, you now know they were actually building you. Not because they meant to, but because pain has a way of sharpening us when we finally refuse to let it define us. This silence you're carrying, it isn't the absence of a voice. It's the presence of power. And while they perform for their audience, crafting illusions, patching ego wounds with new distractions, you walk alone with your head high. Because the only validation you need now is your own reflection, your own alignment, your own breath. There are no words they can say to fix what they broke. There is no version of them that deserves the version of you that now exists. You didn't disappear out of fear. You disappeared out of necessity, out of dignity, out of clarity, and in doing so you've become something rare, something they can't replace. Not because you're trying to be better than others, but because you finally remembered you were never meant to compete. You were always meant to rise. And now they suffer, not because you were cruel, but because you were kind, too honest, too available for someone who only knew how to take. And now that you're gone, The silence screams what your words never could. You lost access to someone unforgettable. They will feel it in every moment of stillness, in every missed connection that doesn't compare, in every night they scroll through old photos and try to remember the sound of your laugh, but it won't come back. You won't come back, not because you're angry, but because you've outgrown the space that once asked you to be small. And that's the legacy now, not revenge, not bitterness, just distance so holy it becomes your shield, just growth so profound it becomes your sanctuary, just peace so solid it becomes their ghost. You do not owe your evolution to those who couldn't hold your foundation, and you do not grieve those who only ever loved the version of you that was easy to use. What they miss now isn't you. It's the energy they can't feed on anymore. What they chase now isn't love, it's relevance. But you are no longer a stage. You are no longer a mirror for their ego. You are your own horizon now. And you walk alone, not in loneliness, but in liberation. So as the final curtain falls, let them perform, let them pretend, let them post. You don't need to prove who you've become. The silence does it for you. And it's louder than anything they ever said.